This is a Ramana Maharshi clip, a talk by Ramana Maharshi with comments by Richard Clarke. This is a time to listen, reflect, and deeply meditate. I'm Richard. Welcome. I'm reviewing and commenting on the book Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. Today is from Talk 145. Mr. Paul Brunton, what is the purpose of such descriptions in religion? Maharshi, only to establish the reality of the self. Brunton, Bhagavan always speaks from the highest standpoint. Sri Bhagavan, with a smile, people would not understand the simple and bare truth, the truth of their everyday, ever-present, and eternal experience. That truth is that of the self. Is there anyone not aware of the self? They would not like even to hear it, the self, whereas they are eager to know what lies beyond heaven, hell, reincarnation. Because they love mystery and not the bare truth, religions pamper to them only to bring them around to the self. Wandering hither and thither, you must return to the self only. Then why not abide in the self even here and now? The other worlds require the self as a spectator or speculator. Their reality is only of the same degrees as that of the spectator or thinker. They cannot exist without the spectator, etc. Therefore, they are not different from the self. Even the ignorant man sees only the self when he sees objects, but he is confused and identifies the self with the objects, that is, the body with the senses and plays in the world. Subject and object all merge in the self. There is no seer nor object seen. The seer and the seen are only the self. There are not many selves either. All are only one self. Paul Brunton raises a question about the purpose of religion, speaking of gods, heaven, hell, etc. Ramana Maharshi responded that the only purpose of such descriptions is to establish the reality of the self. When Paul Brunton points out that Bhagavan always speaks from the highest standpoint, Maharshi, with a characteristic smile, explains that people might find it challenging to understand the simple and bare truth, the truth of their everyday, ever-present, and internal experiences. He notes that this truth is that of the self. Maharshi emphasizes that everyone is aware of the self. It's the root of all their experiences. But people are more interested in exploring what lies beyond objects of consciousness, not the consciousness itself. Concepts like heaven, hell, and reincarnation. Religions, he suggests, cater to this fascination with mystery, but they ultimately guide people back to the fundamental truth of the self. The Maharshi encourages return to the self, pointing out that wandering in pursuit of external phenomena will inevitably lead back to the self. He questions why you wouldn't abide in the self here and now. He then explains the nature of other worlds, stating that they require the self as a spectator. Their reality, he says, is contingent upon the reality of the spectator or thinker. These worlds cannot exist without the self, making them essentially not different from the self, in fact, dependent on the self for their very existence. The object needs the subject to know it. But in a higher non-dual view, they are not different. They are the same thing, both just appearances in the absolute being. Continuing, the Maharshi elaborates on the confusion of the ignorant individual who, despite seeing only the self when perceiving objects, identifies the self with the body and the senses. He says that subject and object ultimately merge in the self, where there is no distinction between the seer and the seen. Ramana declares that the seer and seen are the self, emphasizing the underlying unity. He concludes by reminding us that there is only one self, not two, not many, just one self, and that you are. This dialogue reflects the Maharshi's teaching on the primacy of the self and the illusion of separateness. Ramana urges us to recognize and abide as the eternal truth of our own being. So inquire, know yourself, and be always free and at peace. These videos help bring Ramana Maharshi's teachings into your direct experience. Subscribe now